Max, can you tell me what your process is as far as writing? Because I'm sure it's a little bit different than mine.
I open up a text document and I write. I discovered a great editor. Her name is Lorraine, and her company is wordingwell.com. She really helped me to get to that place where you just put it all down. Don't edit yourself while you're typing. Keep going until you've either covered the subject or until you ain't got no more left in your fingers and let somebody else deal with the editing. The more interesting part of my writing is exactly how I wrote my first book, because I never planned on writing a book, much less four of them, much less being in the middle of a three-book series that I still need to deliver the third book of. But a few years ago, a woman challenged me to be part of a virtual summit. And she said that in order to be part of the summit, I needed to have something I could give away or sell for a discounted price. And she said, I think you could write a book. She said, better yet, Max, I think you could write a book in 30 days or less. She shared one of her favorite quotes with me, which was from Richard Branson. She said he likes to tell people, decide on a goal and then figure out how to get there. A few weeks later, she gets back to me. She says, Max, there's four other women in this virtual summit, and we've decided for marketing purposes it would be better if it was all women. So you're out of the
Oh
summit.
no.
You're
Oh
out
no.
of, and I, well, and the more if you've read much about me at all, you know that I tend to find the positive in the world, and
Sure.
a lot of that is the practice that I gained through being a small carnival operator for over half my life. I told her in writing this book, I really rediscovered my love for writing and storytelling. And so even though I'm not going to be in the summit, I'm going to go ahead and finish the book. I said, and plus, I grew up in a family of carnival owners, so I know what it is to want to put more feet on the ground or butts in the seats or faces behind the screens in this case. So I wasn't mad. I was having problems with thinking it wasn't long enough or important enough or didn't have enough things to teach people about how to overcome the challenges in their life or overcome their excuses. And I was hanging on to it, and I shared it directly with a few friends. And one of them finally said, Max, this Lorraine woman that's helped you with with your website, I know she's an editor. So if you don't send this off to her and start the process of getting it published, I'm going to send it to her for you.
And
I sent the book off, and we did get it published. It is available on Amazon, and it's even available on Audible because I
and
won
Max,
the.
what's the title on that one, just to
Okay,
help?
sure. I should have done that myself.
That's all right.
It's called
That's what I'm
leading
here
you out.
for.
It's called leading you out of the darkness into the light: a blind man's inspirational guide to success. It's about 82 pages long, or about 3.5 hours if you read the audio version. It went from a dare to writing on a book to actually finishing a book. And then a year or two after that book came out, I used several chapters of that book to compete for one of the Amtrak Writers in Residence Awards, which they no longer do. But back then, they would give writers free train tickets to travel around the country and get inspired to work on some sort of a writing project.
I love that idea. That
Oh yeah,
sounds
it was a
that
great
sounds like a
idea, and
lot of
it
fun.
it actually came out of a practical experience. There was a woman visiting the U.S. from France. She flew into New York and couldn't get a plane to connect her flight to Chicago, where she was going to be speaking. She also had a book that she was having trouble finishing. The only way she could get to Chicago was to take the train. And she spent 2 days on the train from New York to Chicago, and she finished her book. And she wrote to people in Amtrak, and she also posted online about it. And Amtrak was like, this is a heck of an idea. We got to get on this. And they did. And it was a great thing for them. It was a very good for building publicity around the fact that you can get work done. You can also have conversations and make meaningful connections with people on the train. But they've gone through several new CEOs since then, and they finally decided it was no longer a good investment.
Well,
But
you know what? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
come on, it's a few train tickets. I think it's one of those deals where somebody made a penny decision that's costing them dollars.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, we do have a love in the United States for the travel log. You look at Jack Kerouac's On the Road, considered one of the greatest works ever written by an American. And I think that created this passion for travel writing, and it's been popular ever since. I actually noticed there's a connection we share. In one of your articles, you mentioned Nulu, which is Doug's invention.
Cats.
Doug Katz, that's right. He was on the channel. I even mentioned him in, let's see, in my first book because he's so smart about intellectual properties. I had him on to talk about that.
Well, there are some people that are great at educating themselves on any subject, and we both know I was lucky enough to get to mention the Nulu knife in my Consumer Reports article on simple things people can do dealing with new vision loss. It was great to have him on my podcast. And, of course, with him, it's not just the Nulu knife. He wants to help lots of other veterans and people who want to support veterans to come up to develop their own products or in some cases services.
Congratulations on getting published in Consumer Reports. They've been around for as long as I can remember. I read the article and I was really it took me a minute to figure out what that one device is. What it looks like to me is it looked like a big long hair pick. And I usually I like to tease myself. I'll look at something first and try to figure out what it's for, and then I'll, cheat and then read if I don't know what can't immediately figure it out. And it was the guide that guides the knife blade, which I think is genius.
And his Nulu knife is a great example for my message around accessibility because you have a product that was designed for somebody with a disability that he then finds out can help even people with disabilities he wasn't aware of.
That's right.
But then he finds out that there's interest in it in not just the culinary world. He finds out there's interest in it in the insurance world because the insurance carriers are thinking that if they get their restaurants to start using this device that will cause fewer repetitive stress injuries, they will save a lot of money. It's a great example of how when we improve accessibility for people who have disabilities, we open up so many other opportunities to
That's
improve
right.
the lives of people who don't have a disability.
Max, you as a writer and a podcaster, you have the ability, which is I think is great, is you can shine a spotlight on these things and platform these inventors, these people with ideas. As we discussed before coming on, I suggested that there's a tremendous competitive advantage because there are not enough businesses that think about accessibility. So you have to really think about how other people with other challenges are using items. Now you're connected with Podmatch, aren't you? Do you work with
Yes,
them?
I am the accessibility advisor to Podmatch. Me and Alex Sanfilippo and Alicia Sanfilippo, the founders, have been good friends for several years. And in fact, he was the first person to hire me to work in the field of accessibility.
Wow.
And he was also one of the first to help me understand that I've been educating people about accessibility for almost 20 years now. Anytime I had a problem with a website or an app, I would reach out to the owner and I would go, "These are my problems, and I'm hoping you can help me solve them either by changing the product or by helping me find workarounds." Sometimes they would respond favorably. He's like, you can never underestimate the value of lived experience. One of the things that is important is being able to communicate to developers exactly how it is people with disabilities use a website or an app. As you mentioned, it's a huge market. Most companies are ignoring people with disabilities. The companies that are willing to make an investment in accessibility do stand out, and I strongly encourage small business owners and new startups to invest in accessibility in the beginning because it's one of the best ways they can gain a competitive advantage over larger, more established firms in the same niche. If you don't have a lot of budget, you don't have a lot of power, your voice ain't very loud yet, you want to stand out. And sadly, you can stand out by being accessible.
And you write quite a bit on the Blind Blogger. Is that the best place for people to connect with you?
I think the best place for people to connect with me is my LinkedIn profile, which is, I'm Maxwell Ivey over there. It's Ivy. I'm still trying to figure out how to combine all of Max's various personalities into one piece
Okay.
of, because there's the carnival owner, and the carnival stuff is kind of like my origin story. The work I do as a podcaster, not only my own show and being a guest, but, helping others understand, and then we've got the accessibility stuff. And so, with all that I've done and continue to do, I feel like I got about 5 personalities, and I don't really have one website where it all comes together except for my LinkedIn profile.
LinkedIn's a great place. Yeah, a
You
great
know,
place to
it's
connect.
it's a great place to connect. My goal in 2026 is to find a way to use one of those two URLs to bring everything together under one website that I can just say, go to maxivy.com. That would be so cool. So, but for
Sure.
now, go to linkedin.com/in/Maxwell Ivey.
And of course, the goal of a lot of entrepreneurs is to get people off of those platforms because we don't own the platforms. The importance of having a website is you can direct people off of those platforms onto something that you own and control. But I wanted to get to something that you mentioned in your background that shocked me because it corrected a misconception that I had. I actually assumed in the early 2000s that the internet had already implemented a lot of accessibility. I read that you had to write some of your own code to get some things done.
2007, when I'm starting my first website, the Midway Marketplace, to help people broker their surplus amusement equipment. At that time, there was three ways to build a website. One was you hired somebody and paid them thousands of dollars. The second option was what you see is what you get, or WYSIWYG, which wouldn't have worked for me. And then the third option was building a website by learning to code HTML, which I went to the W3C.org website and taught myself one type of code at a time, from creating a page to adding links to adding images to embedding your email address. And basically, to use the old Johnny Cash song, I did it one piece at a time. And
That's a great song.
oh, it's a
Great
great song.
tune.
And the thing is, I understand that building a website with HTML is hard. But the thing I liked about HTML, and I have days now where I think, man, some things were a lot easier when I just coded them instead of depending on WordPress, is there's a simplicity and a symmetry to HTML. Once you figure out the format and the symmetry, then it's really just a matter of doing the same thing over and over, who knows how many thousand or hundred thousands of times. There are days where I'm more frustrated by WordPress than I ever was by HTML.
It makes sense. If there was a symmetry to HTML, if there's a logic to it, it does seem like because certain things are intuitive and certain things are non-intuitive. There are products and companies that intentionally create friction in certain products. I want to make sure we cover this too. New traveling and letting strangers take the pictures. Can you give us just a nutshell explanation of what that experience was like? Because it's very brassy to do have because I travel alone quite a bit into some places that people say I'm crazy and I've never had any trouble. But when I read your story, I thought, no, this guy's really brassy. He's really taking chances.
Uh, it actually started with a podcast interview because I knew I was going to New York as part of my Writer in Residence prize. I'm interviewing Michael Schwartz, a former award winning video photographer who is losing his sight but not his storyteller's vision. And I had him on my podcast like 3 or 4 months before I went to New York. I said, what do? You obviously can't see everything you're photographing. He said, well, Max, what you do is you get the widest possible angle lens you can get, and you take as much film as you can take, and then you find somebody you trust to sort it out in editing, because you can edit stuff down. You can't fix things if you have to expand them or if you didn't take enough pictures. My nephew bought me this really simple Canon DSLR, and it wasn't expensive enough that I felt like I'd have to worry about somebody stealing it from me. Plus, I have a motto: you meet the people you expect to meet. I took this little camera, and whenever I thought I had an idea for a good photo, I would just ask somebody to take the pictures for me. I had pictures taken by waiters, the pedal taxi driver, the skate guards at Rockefeller Center. My favorite pictures in the book were taken by the Secret Service agents at Trump Tower, because when I went in 2016, that was one of the places everybody was going in New York, regardless of their political affiliation. It just became a thing. And so the Secret Service agents there, I went in the building and I mentioned that I was going to, rest up for a few minutes before I went to my next destination, but that I was disappointed because I didn't get any pictures because the security guards at the building told me they couldn't help me take any. And the Secret Service guy says, "We'll fix that." So after they X-rayed my bag, the Secret Service guy took pictures of me with other Secret Service guy and with
Oh,
some
that's great.
firemen. And at the end, I said, you've been really good about this. I just want to know, is there a chance I could get you to take a picture or get one of these other guys to take a picture that makes it look like you're about to rough me up. And he said, sure. And of course, I have no way of reviewing the photo for myself, but I'm told that it is a very playful picture for a Secret Service guy. And who knows if it had happened this year instead of 2016, it might have got somebody fired. I don't know.
Right,
Um,
right. No,
but
I love that.
the
I love
but
that
the, yeah,
approach.
but the thing is I came home with a little over 200 pictures,
Wow.
and my editor worked it down to 60 of the best pictures. And then in some pictures, people's faces were clear, so she blurred out some faces so that I wouldn't have to worry about the copyright issues with
Oh,
those
okay.
people. And so I have this book. It's a 300-page book of the experience of competing for and winning the award, and then going to New York, and a lot of the things that went into going and enjoying my time while I was there. It's a great motivational and travel book. I've been told that's why I didn't do better on the bestseller list, because it's not one or the other, it's both, and things that are
Ah,
more than one thing, don't always sell real well on the internet. It's my favorite book. Even now, if I give it to people who don't know me, they want to know who took the pictures.
can you give us the title to that as well? Because I did
Sure.
see that on Amazon.
Right. So that's the Blind Bloggers New York City Adventure: How You Can Make Your Dreams Come True. And besides the experiences at the end of each chapter, there's some reminders of motivational suggestions for the people that are reading the book. And I have to thank my editor for putting those in. When I finish this next book, she will definitely be the person I reach out to help me get it published.
Fantastic. So share with us, Max, what book do you have coming up?
Well, I did the first book on my New York City trip. I did a second book about going out and working to promote my writing through book signings and public speaking. I'm working on a third book that will tie all of that in together with what I consider my highlight walk out of the movie and cheer moment, which was speaking at Podfest in 2020 on the topic of overcoming your excuses, facing your fears, and finally publishing your podcast. I ended up with a standing ovation for my talk on helping people overcome their excuses. And I feel like that's a good ending point for that book. When you self publish a book, you have a lot of expenses: the editing, the formatting, the ISBN numbers, the cover art. And as I like to tell my brother, I'm like, Patrick, I would rather write where they pay me than write where I have to pay them.
That's right. Yeah, the traditional publisher where they just pick you up and hand you a big check and go from
Yeah,
there.
I actually sent some query letters out. Sadly, none of them are ever going to be interested in my travel books, because the big publishers don't like to touch anything that's already been self-published.
That's true.
Every so often, I pitch a book of short stories based on my experiences growing up in a carnival family, and also growing up losing my vision. And I've also occasionally pitched a nonfiction book on accessibility, because I know there are lots of people who've written about the technical standards, and they've written, let's call them textbook type approaches to accessibility. I really think that there's a market for a book on accessibility that includes some good storytelling from a good storyteller. There's a thing called audio descriptions, or described audio, where if you listen to a movie or TV show on a secondary audio track, you can hear narrators describing the action whenever there's not dialogue
Oh,
taking place. And the first time there was a law about that in the U.S., it was passed, and it was a few months later, the television industry went to court. We didn't fight for the audio descriptions the way I think we should have, and we allowed them to be withdrawn.
I'm aware of closed captioning, and I'm sitting here thinking I didn't even know. So again, if they do change the requirements, I want to tie it back in because I talk a lot about the law and legislation, both
Mhm.
on the podcast and privately. I'm a big fan of understanding it because I think people get abused when they don't understand the law or they don't understand the legislative process. And it's also a business competitive advantage to understand if there's about to be a change. The first thing I think as an entrepreneur is people are going to have to rush in, and that's a massive business opportunity. You're helping the community as well too, but you have to keep the lights on. So that's going to open up a whole new market, and there's not immediately going to be a lot of competition.
You talk about laws and the way they take place. They always take a long time. And the first thing most large businesses will do is to try to figure out a way to avoid complying with them, which is why I emphasize educating business owners about the advantages of accessibility, because the regulatory side of it, the compliance, is only going to get us so far. There are going to be a lot of companies that are going to be figuring out how can they delay and what are the minimum requirements so that they can meet the letter of the law, even if they don't meet the spirit of true inclusion.
That's
So
right.
you're
They
right.
call the laws
Understanding the way laws work is very important, and I think the most thing we can understand about laws is they generally are not going to achieve the things that we think they're going to achieve, and sometimes there are some really positive or negative unintended consequences of new laws. Here's one of those things, seeing it from both sides of the fence, is I can see where living in an international business world like we do nowadays, I could see some companies deciding either to relocate or not to do business in the European Union or not to do business online. I'm hopeful that a lot of US based businesses are going to want to improve accessibility because they're global companies. One of the reasons why I'm very blessed to be associated with Podmatch. I mean, there's three people running that company, and they're doing accessibility better than Amazon and self-publishing. And
I've
I
really
don't,
been bragging on them. They do a great job with a skeleton crew. Before we get too deep into that, I just wanted to say that although I didn't feel like I got a lot from college because I went at 30 and I had already been an entrepreneur and I got a business degree. But I do remember one professor really knocking my socks off when they said that the law is the moral minimum. And it goes right to the heart of what you just said a moment ago. And he said, if you're going to be an ethical company, if you obey the law, you're only at the moral minimum. If you really want to be a good company and make positive change, you have to go way above. So whatever the law is, far exceed that.
I'm going to have to remember that. I'm a storyteller, not a copywriter, because that's a very succinct way of explaining what I'm trying to get across to a lot of people. That
He was a heck of a professor, Max. You would have really liked him. I hate to say it, but I think there were only three or four professors there that made any impression on me. In wrapping up, Max, we do know that you want people to connect with you on LinkedIn. Of course, we're both fans and members of Podmatch, and Alex Sanfilippo and his team are doing a great job. Is there anything else you want to share with people or anything you want to direct them to?
if after hearing us talk about this, they've decided they want to learn, they want to do more to make their organization's online presence accessible, then I hope they'll reach out to me. Please
I
do
love it.
reach out on LinkedIn or at theaccessibilityadvantage.com. And more than happy to have a short chat. Maybe you have a business idea you want to talk about on my podcast. Maybe you would like to discuss your experience with accessibility. And really, I want my platform to be a place that not only educates people, but also allows those making the effort to do the right thing, that gives them the opportunity to brag about themselves and their teams a little. I want my podcast to not just be about educating others, but to be about places where we promote companies, brands, products, and services that are making the effort.
If you have the ability, which you do, to have the platform to shine the spotlight, it will definitely, when other companies that are not as compliant, that aren't as cooperative, that aren't as helpful, see that from a public relations standpoint to get on board with that. Well, thank you so much, Max. I appreciate your time. That's Maxwell Ivey, everybody, and he is also known as the Blind Blogger. You can find him on LinkedIn, and he's also working with Podmatch, a great organization.